It is not a tragedy for a woman to have no money. The tragedy is when she forgets who she is because of it. Many women today measure their value by their bank balance. But your true worth is not printed on paper or calculated in numbers. It resides in the depth of your awareness, the steadiness of your heart, and the direction of your thoughts. You see, when a woman has no money, she stands at the edge of two possibilities. One, where she becomes anxious, dependent, or bitter, and another where she becomes wise, observant, and rooted. The first path is crowded, noisy, and filled with comparison. The second is quieter, but powerful beyond belief. What you choose in this moment, in this season of less, will determine not only the next chapter of your life, but also how you love, how you lead, and how you live. This talk is not about how to make fast money. It is about how to remember your true power, the kind no one can give you and no one can take away. Let us begin there, with stillness, with breath, and with the clarity that you were never poor, only unaware of the wealth that already lived inside you. There is a silent poverty that weighs heavier than an empty wallet, a kind of inner emptiness that whispers to a woman that she has failed simply because she has nothing material to show for her worth. But let us stop here. Let us challenge this belief gently with presence, because the absence of money is not the absence of value. And when a woman finds herself in a place where her resources are limited, it is not the time to panic. It is the time to return. Return to what? To the truth of who she is without the distractions, the labels, and the constant measuring up to others. What is the first form of currency a woman ever possesses? It is not gold, not silver, not the balance in a bank account. It is the clarity of her mind, the quality of her thoughts, the presence she carries in every moment. When everything external is stripped away, what remains is the self. That self is either a source of calm inner wealth or a chaos that consumes. Modern neuroscience has a powerful lesson to offer here. When a person is under stress, especially financial stress, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, lights up. It begins to hijack the mind. Rational thinking declines. Impulsive decisions increase. Fear becomes a filter, and everything, relationships, opportunities, even personal value, is seen through that lens. But the same science also shows that with emotional regulation, with mindfulness, with practiced awareness, the brain's executive center, the prefrontal cortex, re-engages. This is the part of the brain responsible for clear decisions, problem solving, and long-term vision. So consider this: when a woman has no money, but she has awareness, she is already wealthier than she believes. Because her mind is not enslaved to fear, she can see with clarity, and from clarity, she can move, not desperately, but deliberately. There is a story of an older woman in a quiet mountain village. Her name was Anara. She had once been well off, owning a tea house that many travelers loved, but a flood destroyed it all. Her savings vanished with the rising waters. For a while, people pitied her. They expected her to beg, to fall apart, but she did not. Each morning, she rose with the sun and sat in silence for 1 hour. No one knew what she did during that hour, but over time, something changed in the way she walked through the village. She was not wealthy. She had no business, no fine clothes. But her presence grew deeper, more grounded. Eventually, young women began to visit her, asking questions, not about money, but about life. Anara became the quiet teacher of her town, not because she had more, but because she had found something within herself that even money could not buy. Inner wealth is the foundation. It is the soil from which all external success grows. If the soil is dry, panicked, and depleted, the fruit will be bitter. But if the soil is calm, rooted in stillness and purpose, then even in a season of drought, something powerful begins to grow underground. It is often invisible at first, but it prepares the woman for a kind of abundance that lasts, not a burst of wealth, but a steady flourishing of her being. There is a quiet danger in associating money with identity. Many women grow up being told, directly or subtly, that their security, their power, and even their attractiveness depend on what they possess. So when money is absent, they feel invisible. And when they feel invisible, they start to diminish themselves in relationships. They accept crumbs of affection, tolerate disrespect, or silence their needs, thinking they must earn their right to be loved. But the truth is, this emotional security is a form of wealth that no economic collapse can destroy. A woman who sits in silence and tends to her inner life becomes resilient. She develops the strength to say no to unhealthy connections, even if she is alone. She recognizes that it is not better to be with someone just for financial comfort than it is to walk alone with dignity. In this space of clarity, new energy arises. And energy, personal energy, is the true currency of connection. People are drawn to those who are settled within themselves. A calm woman, a clear woman, is rare. And what is rare is valued. Even in relationships, this principle holds. Emotional energy attracts emotional responses. A woman who meets a man with desperation will often attract control or manipulation. But a woman who shows up with calm presence invites respect. Now consider the second truth that follows naturally from the first. Emotional stability attracts external stability. This is not spiritual idealism. It is practical science. Emotional instability, whether expressed as fear, anger, or anxiety, narrows the brain's ability to see solutions. Opportunities become invisible. But the emotionally grounded person can slow down, can see clearly, can plan rather than panic. This becomes particularly important in relationships. In times of financial pressure, many women begin to see themselves through the lens of their struggle. They wonder, what do I even have to offer? They fear becoming a burden. They stay quiet about their needs. Or they attach themselves to partners who offer financial support but drain their spirit. This is where emotional clarity becomes vital, because the truth is, what you offer in a relationship is not only your resources. It is your wisdom, your awareness, your groundedness. That is the real gift. There was a young woman named Lila. She had been in a long-term relationship with a man who provided everything: house, car, lifestyle. When she lost her job and her own income, she felt useless. Her partner never said it, but she believed it. She started shrinking, saying yes when she meant no, apologizing for her presence. Over time, the relationship turned cold. She could feel it, but she didn't know how to reclaim herself. One evening, she met an older woman in a local library, a woman who dressed modestly and walked with calm steps. They spoke. The older woman asked Lila just one question. What would you still be if everything was taken from you? Layla didn't know how to answer. The silence that followed became the beginning of her journey. Slowly, she began journaling, sitting in stillness, relearning the sound of her own voice. She found a part-time job that paid little, but gave her joy. She smiled more, walked slower, and something shifted in the relationship. Her partner began noticing her again, not because she had money, but because she had presence. Lila had returned to herself, and with that, her world began to respond differently. Emotional stability is attractive, not in the surface sense, but in the energetic sense. When a woman is grounded, she makes others feel grounded. She becomes a safe space, not just for others, but for herself. And from that space, she can build, slowly, intentionally, because wisdom knows that quick success is often followed by quicker downfall. But stability, though slow, builds roots. In Eastern thought, the concept of te, meaning inner virtue or character, teaches that true power is silent. It doesn't need to be declared. It doesn't shout. It simply radiates. A woman who is emotionally stable radiates this silent strength. She does not argue her value. She does not over-explain her worth. She simply lives it. Even when she has nothing, she walks with a kind of wealth that cannot be bought or borrowed. This type of stability has a direct impact on relationships. When a woman has no money, but she has emotional discipline, she sees clearly who truly values her. She can tell the difference between a person who offers support out of genuine care and one who uses her vulnerability as leverage. She doesn't need to guess because she's not clouded by panic, and because she sees clearly, she can choose wisely. Financial scarcity can reveal emotional scarcity, but it can also reveal emotional maturity. The choice is internal. One woman may respond to lack with self-pity, another with self-awareness. One may run towards someone else to fix it, another may turn inward to grow through it. The outcomes are drastically different, and we must understand emotional stability does not mean suppressing emotions. It means feeling everything fully. Fear, sadness, even frustration, but not being ruled by them. It means having the ability to sit with the discomfort, to breathe through it, and to act from intention rather than impulse. Relationships flourish under this kind of inner governance. Because when a woman is emotionally stable, she creates a foundation of trust, not only with others, but with herself. She stops second guessing every decision. She trusts her timing, her growth, and her process. This trust becomes visible. It's the quiet confidence in her tone, the patience in her pace, the wisdom in her words. In the ancient texts, it is said, "She who masters herself is mightier than she who conquers a city." There is something deeply powerful about a woman who, even in the absence of money, does not lose herself. She does not sell her peace for temporary relief. She chooses to cultivate a life of meaning, not because it is easy, but because it is essential. Emotional stability creates the conditions for miracles, not in the magical sense, but in the grounded sense. When the mind is quiet, the next step becomes visible. When the heart is calm, the right relationships are drawn in. When the spirit is centered, even the smallest opportunities become doorways to transformation. And so, if a woman has no money, but she chooses awareness, if she practices stillness, if she nourishes her emotional well-being, then she is not weak. She is in training. She is learning to master the invisible forces that shape everything visible. And that kind of mastery, once gained, becomes a wealth no one can steal. Let us keep walking from here, gently, with breath, into what comes next. There is a kind of power that comes from not rushing, a kind of quiet strength that belongs to the one who does not react, but responds. In a world that constantly demands a woman's urgency, act now, decide now, prove your worth now. It is rare to find a woman who can sit still with herself. Yet, it is exactly this kind of woman who commands respect without ever raising her voice. When a woman has no money and yet chooses not to panic, she is not weak. She is practicing the most radical form of intelligence, emotional sovereignty. Stillness is often mistaken for passivity. But stillness, in its true sense, is not the absence of action. It is the presence of awareness. It is not about doing nothing. It is about doing the right thing at the right time for as a right reason. In Eastern philosophy, this is called Wu Wei, translated not as inaction, but as effortless action, action that flows from alignment rather than force. In a relationship, stillness is a superpower. When a woman refrains from reacting impulsively to every word, every shift in energy, every change in circumstance, she becomes unshakable. She gives herself the time to observe, reflect, and choose her response. This doesn't mean she is disconnected. It means she is wise enough to recognize that her energy is sacred, that not every situation deserves her immediacy, that some things need to be felt fully before they are spoken about. There was a woman named Mariam. After losing her job, she found herself in a financial bind. Her partner began making subtle remarks, things like, "Well, I guess I'll be taking care of everything now," or "Maybe you should try harder to find work." It's been weeks. These comments stung. But instead of reacting, instead of snapping back in defense or collapsing in shame, Mariam sat with it. She journaled every word he said. She noted how it made her feel. She watched her own thoughts in response. And then, calmly and without blame, she brought up the conversation. She said, "When you say these things, it affects how I see myself and how I feel in this relationship. Can we speak openly about what's really underneath?" That conversation became a turning point. Not because she fought to win, but because she stayed centered long enough to invite deeper truth. Stillness is strategic. It gives you access to information that rushing will always miss. When the mind is still, you begin to see clearly, not just what others are doing, but why you are feeling what you feel. You begin to notice the patterns, the beliefs that rise, the fear of being a burden, the shame of being seen without financial independence. And when these hidden beliefs come to the surface, they no longer control you from the shadows. You now have the space to work with them consciously. This inner space, this pause before action, is what separates maturity from reactivity. In relationships, it is what allows true communication to arise. Because so often, conflict is not about what is said. It is about the energy underneath what is said. A woman who is reactive might yell or shut down when her partner disappoints her. But a woman who has cultivated stillness asks herself first, what is this emotion trying to show me? Is this about the situation or about an old wound being touched? She sits with the discomfort, she breathes through it, and then she moves, not to blame, not to dominate, but to understand. This depth is rare because it requires patience, it requires trust, and in a society that glorifies instant gratification, it is countercultural. But this is precisely why it is so powerful. When a woman chooses not to chase, whether it's chasing a man, an opportunity, or a solution, she becomes deeply magnetic. Her energy speaks a different language. It says, "I am whole. I am enough. I am moving from clarity, not fear." People feel this. They may not understand it, but they feel it, and they respond to it. A woman who is rooted in her stillness changes the emotional temperature of a room. She doesn't need to control others because she is in control of herself. She doesn't need to fix or prove anything because her worth is not up for debate. This doesn't mean she never doubts. It doesn't mean she never worries. It means she has trained herself to sit with doubt without letting it drive her actions. She has made peace with uncertainty. And in that peace, she finds surprising strength. Neuroscience supports this. Studies show that people who practice mindfulness, intentional awareness without judgment, experience changes in the brain structure. The amygdala, responsible for fear and impulsive reaction, becomes less active. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of decision making and long-term planning, becomes stronger. In other words, stillness is not just spiritual. It is biological. It rewires the brain to make wiser choices, especially under stress. In relationships, this is a game changer. When a woman is centered, she does not get swept away by drama. If someone ghosts her, she doesn't spiral into self-blame. If someone disrespects her, she doesn't tolerate it to keep the peace. Instead, she observes. She notes the pattern. She trusts her inner knowing, and from that trust, she responds. Perhaps by asking a direct question, perhaps by stepping back, perhaps by walking away completely. But whatever action she takes, it is rooted in self-respect, not fear of loss. And that difference changes everything. Consider this. When you are grounded in your energy, you do not need to chase love. You become love. You carry it in your gaze, in your tone, in the way you listen to yourself. You do not beg to be seen. You simply are seen, because presence is visible. There is a saying from an old Eastern text, when the water is still, the moon reflects perfectly. In the same way, when your mind and emotions are still, you see life clearly. You see people's intentions. You see your own needs. You make decisions from a place of integrity. Neuroscience tells us that these patterns are not fixed. The brain is plastic. It changes, but change requires awareness, and awareness begins with slowing down, not rushing into solutions, not distracting with noise, but sitting, feeling, seeing. One afternoon, a woman in her 60s named Noura shared something with her daughter. Noura had never worked. Her husband had always handled the finances. After he passed away, she realized she didn't even know how to access their bank account. She felt helpless, small. But one day, while searching through old documents, she found a letter she had written to herself when she was 20. It spoke of dreams, travel, writing, teaching, none of which she had pursued. Tears fell, not from regret, but from recognition. That night, Noura made a decision. She would learn one thing at a time. First, how to manage her bills, then how to cook for one, then how to write again. Scarcity had not stolen her life. It had revealed where she had outsourced it. For decades, she had survived. But now, for the first time, she felt alive. Not because she gained money, but because she reclaimed herself. When a woman sees scarcity as a season, not a sentence, everything changes. She stops defining herself by what she lacks. She starts recognizing the richness of what she already carries. Her courage, her resilience, her intuition, her capacity to love even in pain, her ability to rise again and again, even when no one is watching. In relationships, this shift is profound. She no longer clings. She no longer justifies mistreatment. She no longer trades dignity for temporary shelter. Instead, she stands, sometimes silently, sometimes trembling, but standing nonetheless. And from that standing, she learns to speak again, not with volume, but with truth. Scarcity becomes her teacher, a teacher that strips her down, not to shame her, but to show her the power of simplicity, the strength of authenticity, the weight of her own presence. There's a quote often shared in monasteries: when you lose everything, you are free to be anything. This does not mean to glorify poverty, but it means to recognize that sometimes, only in the absence of excess do we see the essentials. And in love, the essentials are what last. A woman who has nothing but herself is not poor. She is in the beginning stages of self-creation. The kind of creation that doesn't depend on applause, that doesn't require a resume, that doesn't shrink in the face of rejection. She becomes a presence. She walks differently. Not with arrogance, but with depth, not with desperation, but with dignity. And she begins to draw in people who do not need to be impressed, only met. People who see value not in status, but in spirit. Scarcity has a way of clarifying what love actually is. When the comfort is gone, when the trips stop, when the meals are simple, what remains? Who stays? Who listens without fixing? Who sees you even when the shine fades? It is in this space that real love is born, because it is chosen, not bought. And so, if you are in that space now, where money is tight, where options feel few, where identity feels shaken, remember this is not the end. This is the forge. And what emerges from it is not a victim, but a woman who sees with new eyes, who walks with steady steps, who speaks with earned wisdom. Scarcity may test your relationships, but it will also reveal which ones are sacred. Scarcity may challenge your view of self, but it will also burn away what is false. And when the flame of scarcity dies down, you will still be standing, not empty, but refined, not broken, but reborn, ready, perhaps, not to return to who you were, but to become who you were always meant to be. A woman's relationship with herself is the foundation upon which every other relationship stands. It is not simply a private matter or an inner dialogue. It is the silent architecture of her entire emotional world. It determines what she tolerates, what she invites, and what she believes she deserves. When a woman does not believe she is valuable, she will unconsciously align herself with people who reflect that belief. Not because she lacks intelligence, but because the unconscious mind always seeks familiarity. We are drawn not to what is healthy, but to what feels familiar. And if self-neglect is familiar, if self-rejection is a thread woven into her history, then love, even when it arrives, may be pushed away or distorted until it fits her internal image. So many women walk into relationships hungry for validation, hoping that someone else will finally reflect back the worth they've never claimed for themselves. This yearning is not weakness, it is deeply human. But when the hunger is too strong, it often leads to emotional starvation, because no matter how much affection or attention is given, it cannot fill a void that was never meant to be filled by another. There is a subtle yet devastating pattern that begins when a woman connects her worth to her finances. She begins to believe that when she has money, she is confident, desirable, worthy of love and respect. But when the money disappears, her confidence slips through her fingers like water. She looks at herself differently in the mirror. She apologizes more. She becomes smaller in rooms where she used to stand tall. And worst of all, she starts to accept treatment that she would have once rejected. This is why the internal voice must be examined, because the way a woman speaks to herself when no one else is listening determines how she allows others to speak to her. When she is alone with her silence, does she offer herself compassion, or does she whisper criticism? Does she extend understanding, or does she replay every mistake? These inner patterns become external dynamics. If she constantly tells herself she is unworthy without money, she will attract people who confirm that belief, not because she wants to suffer, but because she has not yet recognized that her energy teaches others how to treat her. Energy is not something mystical. It is something that speaks before words do. It's the posture of the body, the tone in the voice, the way the eyes meet or avoid contact, the confidence or hesitation in setting a boundary. People feel it. They may not consciously analyze it, but they sense it, and they respond accordingly. There was a young woman named Amina who worked as a therapist. For years, she helped others uncover their emotional patterns and heal deep wounds. But after leaving her job due to burnout and experiencing financial strain, something shifted inside her. She stopped trusting her intuition. She entered a relationship with a man who, while charming on the surface, never truly respected her time or boundaries. He would cancel plans last minute, borrow money without returning it, and subtly undermine her opinions. Amina, despite her training, found herself excusing his behavior. "He's just stressed," she'd say. Or, "I don't want to seem difficult." It wasn't until a friend asked her a piercing question that she paused. "Would you let your clients accept this? Then, why do you?" That night, she sat in silence, not as a therapist, but as a woman who had forgotten herself. She wrote a letter, not to him, but to her younger self. In it, she apologized for every time she silenced her needs to keep someone else comfortable. She apologized for every time she mistook neglect for patience, and every time she stayed longer than she should have just to avoid the pain of starting over. That letter marked a turning point, not because she confronted him immediately, but because she reconnected to herself. Within a month, she ended the relationship, not out of anger, but out of clarity. She had remembered who she was, This remembering is essential because relationships are never just about two people. They are about the internal landscapes each person carries. If a woman's inner landscape is barren, marked by criticism, insecurity, and scarcity, then she will walk into love without roots. She will cling when she should release. She will stay silent when she should speak. She will try to earn what should have been freely given. But when her inner world is rich, when she has cultivated a deep sense of self-worth that is not tied to her income, her appearance, or her ability to please, then everything changes. She no longer fears being alone because her own company is not a punishment. It is a sanctuary. She does not accept love with conditions because she knows her heart is not a bargain to be negotiated. And she does not stay in relationships that drain her spirit just to avoid the discomfort of being single. There is an old Eastern saying, "The way you speak to yourself becomes the way the world speaks to you." This is not philosophy. It is observable truth. If a woman looks in the mirror and sees lack, unworthiness, or failure, she carries that into every interaction. She apologizes for existing. She tiptoes around her desires. She over-explains her boundaries, hoping to soften their impact. But if she looks in the mirror and sees someone in process, someone worthy despite the mess, someone learning and growing through the fire, then she speaks with different energy. She doesn't need to dominate a room to feel powerful. Her stillness becomes her authority. Her humility becomes her strength. Her honesty becomes her magnetism. This type of woman attracts relationships that mirror her self-respect. Partners who listen because she listens to herself. Friends who honor her boundaries because she honors them first. And even in moments of conflict or misunderstanding, the foundation remains strong because she does not seek to be rescued. She seeks to be met. There was another story, quiet and almost ordinary, about a woman named Elena. She had been married for 12 years. The first few years were loving, but as her husband's career advanced and hers stalled, an imbalance formed. She began taking on more at home, managing the children, keeping the house, supporting his goals. Her own dreams faded into the background. She never complained. But over time, a quiet resentment grew inside her, not because he stopped loving her, but because she had stopped loving herself. One morning, while folding laundry, a question surfaced uninvited. When did I stop being mine? It startled her, but it wouldn't go away. That evening, instead of scrolling through her phone or numbing her restlessness with tasks, she sat down with a blank notebook. And she wrote one question at the top: who am I now? What followed were pages of memories, forgotten passions, suppressed desires, and unspoken truths. She didn't speak to her husband about it for weeks. She didn't accuse him. She simply began reconnecting to herself. A walk alone each morning, reading poetry again, saying no when she meant it. Her energy shifted, and he noticed. One evening, he asked her, "You seem different. What's going on?" She replied, "I'm remembering who I am when no one's watching." That conversation became the beginning of a new relationship, not with him, but with herself. And from that place, the marriage transformed, not by demand, but by example. Women are often taught to put others first, to serve, to support, to give without asking. But a relationship where one person constantly gives while erasing themselves is not love. It's imbalance. And imbalance, no matter how romantic it looks on the surface, always leads to resentment. When a woman roots herself in her own worth, she breaks this cycle. She no longer waits for someone else to tell her she matters. She no longer tests her value by how much she is needed. She no longer sacrifices her well-being for the illusion of connection. This inner anchoring allows her to love more fully, not less. Because love that comes from wholeness is generous without being depleting. It gives without losing itself. It supports without surrendering its voice. She becomes someone who can say, "I love you, but I will not abandon myself for you." And that sentence, simple, clear, and deeply self-respecting, becomes a line of protection. Not a wall to keep people out, but a boundary to keep her integrity in. This kind of woman knows that being alone is not a tragedy. Being disconnected from oneself is. And even in financial hardship, even when the outer world reflects struggle, her inner world becomes a garden. A place where her voice is honored, where her needs are not minimized, where her path is not determined by someone else's permission. And when she walks into the world from this place, people notice, not because she demands attention, but because she carries presence. Her energy no longer pleads, it commands gently. Her eyes no longer search, they see clearly. Her heart no longer chases, it opens, but wisely. In this space, love becomes something sacred, not just emotional intensity, but mutual growth, mutual respect, a deep honoring of self and other. Because when a woman knows her worth, she teaches the world how to love her properly, not through force, but through the way she shows up for herself, quietly, daily, unapologetically. When a woman finds herself without money, what begins to surface is not merely the discomfort of limited choices, but a deeper revelation about what she truly relies on. Many women unknowingly build their sense of security upon external scaffolding, status, financial independence, appearance, approval from others. These structures, though often necessary in a practical sense, are fragile when they become the sole source of her power. When even one piece is removed, the illusion of strength crumbles. And in this fragile state, something much more essential starts to emerge: the need to build a foundation that no crisis can shake. True security, the kind that anchors a woman during storms, doesn't come from a full bank account or a stable relationship. It comes from within, layer by layer, through conscious practice and commitment to herself. It begins with cultivating resilience that doesn't just survive hardship, but transforms it into inner mastery. And at the heart of this transformation is one question: or what is unshakable in me? Even when everything else shakes, a woman's real power lies in her internal foundation, the habits she builds when no one is watching, the self-talk she practices when she's discouraged, the boundaries she maintains when she's tempted to compromise just to feel safe again. This is the power no one can take from her, because it's not borrowed from circumstance, it is forged from choice, from consistency, from presence. One of the most powerful aspects of this foundation is discipline. Not the harsh, punishing kind, but a calm and compassionate discipline that says, I will show up for myself even when I don't feel like it. I will breathe instead of break. I will pause instead of panic. This form of discipline trains the nervous system to stop looking for safety in chaos. It slowly unhooks the emotional dependency on validation and replaces it with stability rooted in self-respect. In relationships, this internal discipline becomes vital, because when a woman has no financial safety net, she becomes more vulnerable to emotional compromise. She might accept behavior she knows is harmful just to avoid the fear of being alone or unsupported. She might silence her voice to keep peace, or tolerate disrespect to maintain a sense of belonging. But the woman who has built her foundation slowly and intentionally, who has made peace with discomfort, who has trained her mind not to react impulsively, can endure solitude without shrinking. She can choose patience over panic. She can say, I am not okay right now, but I am still whole. There was once a woman named Rima who, after losing her job and navigating a painful breakup, found herself living in a small studio with barely enough for rent. Her former life had been one of ease, brunches with friends, travel, and a comfortable partnership. But with everything stripped away, she was left with herself and silence. The first few weeks, she scrolled endlessly through job boards, sent out dozens of resumes, and waited for something to lift her out of the weight. But nothing changed, so one morning, rather than reaching for her phone, she sat on the edge of her bed and asked aloud, "What part of me have I never built because life was too comfortable?" It was a difficult question, but one that began a quiet revolution. Instead of applying for more jobs out of desperation, she committed to a different routine. She would wake before sunrise, meditate for 20 minutes, move her body gently, read one page of something wise, speak no negative word about herself, and commit to one small act that day, not for money, but for meaning. Some days, it was helping an elderly neighbor with groceries. Other days, it was writing a short blog post or walking for 30 minutes in silence. After several weeks, something shifted, not outside, but within. Her nervous system began to calm. Her thoughts became less frantic. Her perspective opened. And from this new place, opportunities started to appear. Not because the universe had finally noticed her, but because she had finally noticed herself. This shift is subtle but profound. When a woman builds herself from the inside, she becomes magnetic, not in the performative sense, but in the energetic one. People begin to notice her presence, her clarity, her strength. They sense that she is not seeking to be rescued, that she does not enter relationships with a void to be filled, but with a fullness to be shared. The truth is, many people misunderstand attraction. They believe it's about how you look, what you say, or how exciting you appear. But the deepest form of attraction is safety. Emotional safety, energetic stability. A woman who has cultivated a steady, internal world naturally becomes a grounding presence for others. And in relationships, this kind of presence cannot be imitated. It is felt. There's a story from a small coastal village about a woman named Sarah. Her husband, a fisherman, had died suddenly, leaving her with 2 children and no income. The village whispered. Some advised her to remarry quickly. Others pitied her. But Sarah, though grieving, chose a different path. Every dawn, she would walk to the sea, sit on a flat stone, and simply breathe. Not pray for rescue, not ask for answers, just breathe. Over time, she began to mend nets with the elderly women. She began trading small crafts. She started a ritual of sharing tea with other widows. And slowly, the whispers in the village changed. They no longer spoke of her as the poor widow. They began to speak of her strength, her calm, her dignity. What Sarah had done was something many never realize. She had turned her pain into presence. She had taken the emptiness left by her loss and used it to deepen her relationship with life itself. And from that relationship, she began to rebuild not just her livelihood, but her inner foundation. This is the hidden gift in hardship. It reveals what is unpracticed. It exposes the cracks not to shame us, but to show us where our work lies. If scarcity breaks you, it is because your foundation was built on what could be taken. But when your identity is built on what cannot be stolen, your breath, your discipline, your clarity, then even when everything else is gone, you remain. One of the greatest misconceptions is that empowerment means constant action, boldness, or always having a plan. But real empowerment often looks like stillness, restraint, silence, the ability to sit in discomfort without demanding instant relief. The ability to say, I am here, I am hurting, and I am still whole. This requires practice, and practice is the bridge between knowing and becoming. From a psychological perspective, practice rewires the brain. Every time a woman resists the urge to self-abandon, she strengthens her internal boundary. Every time she chooses presence over panic, she teaches her nervous system that she is safe in herself. This is how inner safety is built. Not through intellectual understanding, but through lived experience. And this inner safety is what sustains a woman in relationships. When she is grounded, she can witness without reacting. She can listen without losing herself. She can love without collapsing. Because her foundation is not built on how another person behaves. It is built on how she relates to her own emotions, her own needs, her own truth. There was another story, this one about a woman named Liana. She had been in love with a man who adored her until she lost her job. At first, he was supportive, but over time, he began making her feel small, questioning her choices, minimizing her opinions. It was subtle, never overt, but deeply felt. One evening, while they were out at dinner, he made a joke at her expense in front of friends. Everyone laughed. Liana smiled too, but something in her cracked open. That night, she sat in the bathroom and cried quietly, not because of the joke, but because of all the times she had ignored her intuition, dismissed her discomfort, and allowed herself to be slowly chipped away. That night, she didn't leave, she didn't fight, she just made a decision. That from that moment on, she would begin rebuilding her relationship with herself. Slowly, day by day, she started going for walks alone, not as an escape, but as a return. She reconnected with old passions, started journaling again, began speaking up, not with fire, but with firmness. 6 months later, the relationship ended, not because she was angry, but because she was clear. And clarity made the noise unbearable. She could no longer participate in something that asked her to shrink. And she didn't need anyone to agree with her choice, because the woman she had become no longer sought permission to be herself. This is the power of a strong foundation. It does not depend on the world being kind. It does not wait for circumstances to be perfect. It is a decision to be rooted, no matter what the weather brings. When a woman commits to this kind of inner work, she may still struggle. She may still face rejection, loss, or uncertainty, but she will face them with different eyes. Not as someone hoping to survive, but as someone practicing how to thrive from the inside out. And the relationships that grow from this place will feel different. They will not feel like salvation. They will feel like companionship. They will not rescue her. They will walk beside her, not to complete her, but to witness her fullness. Because when a woman becomes deeply secure in herself, she stops searching for someone to carry her. She begins looking for someone who will walk with her, and she can tell the difference, not because of how loud they speak, but by how they hold space when she is silent. A foundation built from within is the beginning of freedom. It is what allows a woman to stand tall even in scarcity, to remain soft without being stepped on, to give love without losing herself, and to remember, always, that who she is becoming is far more powerful than what she has lost. When a woman has no money, the world often sees lack, but what truly unfolds beneath the surface is a sacred opportunity, a call to remember who she is beyond possessions, titles, or roles. It is not about what she cannot afford. It is about what she can no longer avoid, the truth of her own power. This journey is not for the faint of heart. It requires her to stand in the silence, to walk through the fire, and to face herself with unwavering honesty. But through every uncertain step, she begins to discover something far more valuable than wealth, the ability to respond to life from within, not react to it from without. She learns to observe without collapsing, to speak with clarity instead of desperation, to love from wholeness instead of hunger. She no longer measures her worth by her bank account or her relationship status, but by the depth of her stillness, the strength of her boundaries, and the peace in her own presence. In this way, scarcity becomes a teacher, not a curse. And what it teaches is simple. When a woman roots herself in self, respect, emotional discipline, and conscious presence, she cannot be broken.